think it's live. Popped up and said something went wrong, but yeah, it's live. Okay. Oh, but the name is messed up.
Around the 512? Interesting.
No, it just says Zachary Smith's Zoom meeting. All right. That's good. All right, ready?
Been ready. Yeah, sorry. Someone responded to my tweet and was like, Steelers were dog shit, changed my mind. And I went through and I saw he was a streamer. And I responded, your streams were dog shit, changed my mind.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Round the 412 Fantasy Football Show, proudly presented by Crowworthy. Winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. Follow at Crowworthy on Twitter. Visit us at crowworthy.com. You can go to the Pittsburgh City page for podcasts like this one, blogs, which I'm about to start doing for them, by the way, and more. I am Smitty. With me, as always, my co-host, Donnie Druin.
You're just going to casually drop the blog news on us and just kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted that I wanted to get back into writing, and I think it's time. So I'm going to start writing for Crowworthy here very shortly.
Here for it, brother. I like it.
All right, so we put out what we were going to do as our topic list for this week. We know it's playoff time for a lot of people. I know that your home league only an 8-man league. I don't think you guys start your playoffs till next week, correct?
Correct, yep.
So not for you guys, but for me, my playoffs start in all 3 of the leagues that I'm in. I'm sure a lot of people out there, their playoffs start. So what we're going to do is go through, tell you guys that we would start with in their playoff stretch here, looking at weeks 14, 15, and 16, guys that we would avoid. And then, of course, the waiver wire, as we always do. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in chat or, hey, right now, we put out the tweet last night. If we were to get something on Twitter, a response while we are recording, we'll absolutely answer that during the show. But other than that, I think we can kind of just jump right into it. Obviously, we want to save, I feel like, the quarterback for last here, the most important position in football, the most I think you could argue it's not the most important position when it comes to fantasy football, as we always talk about when it's draft time. But that's neither here nor there. Let's go to the tight ends. And I'll start off with my playoff tight end that I would start. And this might come as a surprise to some people. And it might be a little bit of a homer pick. I'm not too impressed with what I've seen the last couple of games, but the targets have absolutely been there, and I think they're going to still be there. It's Eric Ebron, the tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who has Buffalo and Cincinnati, who are 2 prime matchup the next 2 weeks. Then he finishes off with Indy, which is a little bit of a middle-of-the-pack matchup, but hey, it's a revenge game for Eric Ebron, the team that he last played for, so I really like that aspect of it. Eric Ebron, the targets have absolutely been there week in and week out, even when he's dropping the ball back-to-back weeks now where he's had multiple drops in those games. But the target volume has not changed for him. If anything, we've seen it rise throughout the year, starting in that 4 to 5 range. All of a sudden, he's seeing like 8 to 10 targets a week. And with Ben Roethlisberger throwing the ball 50 times a game, you can argue that that's not the best course of success for the actual team. But if that's what's happening, Eric Ebron is going to be a huge beneficiary there. We've seen it the last couple of weeks, and I think that continues where he's offering you, borderline tight end 1, tight end 2 value. And if he gets in the end zone, definitely tight end 1.
Definitely, yeah. And funny you say that because Eric Ebron is also my tight end to start in the playoffs, considering his fantasy playoff schedule. You already mentioned he plays Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Indianapolis. Both Buffalo and the Bengals are top 10 in points allowed to tight ends this year. I will say Indianapolis, the toughest defense in terms of allowing points to the tight end position. But, I mean, if you get all the way to week 16 and you're in the championship game, I feel like there's going to be a lot more problems that you're going to be worrying about. But so long as he can fix the drops issues that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, you already said it. I mean, he's getting double-digit targets a game, which is almost unheard of at the tight end position outside of Travis Kelce and George Kittle. So I definitely like Eric Ebron should he somewhat fix his hands.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I already, gave my spiel on this, but
Yeah.
you mentioned a great point there as well. You're talking about a guy getting double-digit targets at a position where that just doesn't happen unless, you're Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller potentially as well, who just absolutely blew up last week. But after those guys, you're always looking for, if you don't have one of those guys week in and week out, you're looking for kind of like a plug-and-play guy. Eric Ebron could definitely be that guy, I feel like, this week. The guy that I'd be avoiding is going to be Dallas Goedert. And the reason – so his schedule looks like New Orleans, Arizona, Dallas. And it's funny because we were actually talking about Jalen Hurts, not during the show, just through a little group message that we are a part of with a friend of the show, Tyler, who's always asked us for fantasy advice. We obviously appreciate him for all the interaction with the show. He was asking us for advice about, potentially acquiring Jalen Hurts and stuff. I'm going to talk about Jalen Hurts a little bit later in the show, but I think the uncertainty there with Dallas Goedert, the last few weeks haven't been all that productive. We see Zach Ertz come back as well. And I think that Dallas Goedert is going to be tight end one there, and I think that they've started to shift towards that. We saw that they were trying to move Zach Ertz. They broke off extension talks with him. I don't think Zach Ertz's future is in Philadelphia, but I think his presence on the football field for the rest of the season at least is going to limit what Dallas Goedert does. And also, like I said, the uncertainty at the quarterback position. There was uncertainty with Carson Wentz out there, let's be honest, but at least it was that connection was something that we had already seen. We haven't seen what Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert's going to look like. There's a little bit of uncertainty there again, and so he would be a guy that I'm at least avoiding to start this. And the matchups, as I said, they're not great, even if he did have a top flight quarterback thrown to him.
Yeah, it's never really a good thing whenever you have a double duo at the tight end position like you do in Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. And granted, I do agree with you whenever you talk about Dallas Goedert being the tight end one, even whenever Zach Ertz is healthy and back on the field for the stretch of the season. But yeah, there's a lot of unknown in Philadelphia. Fortunately, I do have Dallas Goedert as a backup tight end to Hayden Hurst, so I'm doing phenomenal at the tight end position this year. So my tight end, who I'm not necessarily saying to bench, I'm just saying be wary of his playoff schedule, because if you have this guy, you're definitely going to start him. Darren Waller, Las Vegas Raiders tight end, going up against the Indianapolis Colts, Los Angeles Chargers, and Miami Dolphins. We've already talked about the Colts defense and how they're the number one team in terms of limiting points per game to the tight end position. Dolphins are also a top 5 defense. I don't think a lot of people may have expected to hear that, but whenever just looking at the numbers on Pro Football Reference, they are a top 5 team in terms of fantasy points per game to tight ends. The Chargers are a little bit more friendly, kind of splitting that up between the Colts game and the Dolphins game. So if you do somehow find yourself making a run through the postseason, you do get a bit of a break with Waller facing a more of a friendlier Chargers defense. But yeah, matchups against the Colts and the Dolphins, at least on paper, just doesn't look great.
That's I feel like that's gonna catch a lot of people by surprise, especially with what Darren Waller just did last week. But yeah, absolutely. You talked about game versus the Jets, and granted, nobody has games like Darren Waller just had at the position against anybody. So, you can throw out the fact it was against the Jets, but that doesn't mean much to do against anybody. Is ridiculous. But no, I definitely get it. And, as with anybody that's a pass catcher, their production is going to be tied to their quarterback. So if he has a tough matchup, it makes it a tough matchup for Darren Waller. So I definitely can understand being weary of it. Again, if he's a guy that you have on your roster, I don't.
You're going to start him, I am fully advocating for people not to sit Darren Waller. I'm just saying you might want to temper your expectations just a little bit, especially coming off the 200-yard game.
Right. Yeah. You might need some extra points from your other positions. Okay, so moving along to the wide receiver position, I feel like this one could catch people by surprise a little bit because he's not even wide receiver one for his own team. It's going to be Corey Davis for me in Tennessee as my wide receiver to start. He's got Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay to finish up the season. Only Green Bay out of those matchups is a team that limits that position to top 10. The other two teams, they give up points in bunches to the wide receiver position. A.J. Brown, a little bit banged up as well, and I think that plays into it a little bit. But Corey Davis in his own right is really coming on. I know that, Tennessee obviously didn't pick up that fifth-year option. He's a guy that's looked like, I don't want to say a complete bust, but when you consider the fact that he's the 5th overall pick, but he's a guy that I think is really going to come on in his second contract. That's the type of player that he's looking like. So I'm excited for the future of Corey Davis. And I'm really excited to see what he does down the stretch here again with the Jaguars, the Lions, and the Packers to finish up his fantasy season, because I don't think that he gets more targets necessarily than AJ Brown, but with him being banged up, I think it's going to be closer to even than we think.
No, most definitely. And I think Steelers fans know all too well, how late in the process guys, and especially first round picks, can bloom. We saw it with Bud Dupree. He didn't really start coming on until his fourth or fifth year. I think for a top 5 pick, especially at such a young age and at a position where if you don't produce right away, then people tend to really kind of put you on the back burner. I think Corey Davis is really starting to put it together. I think the presence of AJ Brown on the other side does help. And I think just on fantasy purposes, the injury to AJ Brown, which seems to be a nagging one, it doesn't look like it's going to go away in 1 week. I think that'll help his playoff schedule as well. So no, I definitely can't fault you for thinking that. My guy's definitely more of a established starter, but just with looking at schedules, man, I really think this guy can go on a tear. Allen Robinson is a very, very friendly wide receiver schedule for the fantasy football playoffs. We up against the Texans, Vikings, and Jaguars. So Minnesota and Jacksonville are both in the bottom 5, just in terms of points allowed to the wide receiver position in fantasy football. Houston just outside of the top 10. It looks like Mitch Trubisky is back. And say what we want about Trubisky, I definitely think Allen Robinson's fantasy floor is a lot higher with Trubisky as opposed to a guy like Nick Foles, which is very contrary to what I thought going into the season. But nonetheless, I really like Allen Robinson's schedule. Obviously, you're going to start him regardless, but yeah, he's really got the green light to winning some football games here in the playoffs.
And I love hearing that as an Allen Robinson owner. He was a guy that I considered here as well. But yeah, absolutely. I think for everything that you just said, he's a guy that could absolutely feast and has the potential to win a lot of people a lot of money with the schedule that he has. I'm actually going to talk about one of his teammates here pretty shortly. My wide receiver that I would be avoiding, I think that you could probably still play him as a flex, but he's been hindered by a quarterback switch that I know a lot of people have been calling for. It's Devante Parker, who just has not put up the same numbers with Tua Tagovailoa under center as he has with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's become a lot more touchdown dependent with Tua at quarterback. If he doesn't get in the end zone, he's not really having that great a fantasy day. And he goes against Kansas City, New England, and Vegas to finish up the season. Only Vegas there really is a middle of the pack matchup. The other two are bad matchups. They don't give up a lot of points to wide receivers. And for a team that's not getting a lot of production from the quarterback, Tua's not throwing for a ton of yards. He's not throwing for a ton of touchdowns. It's just not happening for him right now. If he remains the starter, that's going to hinder what Devante Parker does for your fantasy team. So I don't think you can play him as a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I think maybe he deserves some flex consideration just because of what he's done. Obviously going back to last year, his breakout year, this year, he's still been pretty solid, but most of his numbers have come with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. With 2 under center, if he's not scoring a touchdown, he's not doing much.
Definitely, yeah. And, granted, Tua is still kind of figuring out his own footing in the NFL, let alone trying to, spread the ball out and find that established relationship with a guy like Devante Parker. So, if I think you hit the nail on the head, should Ryan Fitzpatrick had been the starter going into the playoff stretch for people, I think it's a lot more easier decision to kind of plug Devante Parker into the lineup and play him. But with the rookie quarterback, you just never know. That's the reality of things. So, going from Devante Parker to Robbie Anderson is actually the guy I am advocating for people to absolutely sit in the fantasy football playoffs. Has a very tough stretch of games here versus Denver, Green Bay, and Washington. Broncos secondary is very immense, middle of the pack. It doesn't scare me. It doesn't not scare me. It's kind of whatever based on the matchup. Like you alluded to earlier, Green Bay is always a tough challenge whenever it comes to their secondary and their ability to limit receivers. And then the Washington football team, second fewest points allowed to receivers. I think they've done a phenomenal job all year of clamping down on guys. And then you want to take into consideration Darius Sanders, aka Christian McCaffrey, will be back this week. And yeah, it's just a whole slew of things going wrong for Robbie Anderson, and the upcoming stretch of games just doesn't play out in his favor.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. Again, a guy that I kind of considered here as well. He's a guy that I talked about just a couple weeks ago, I think. I don't remember exactly what segment it was, but it was essentially like, this is a guy that I wouldn't be using for the rest of the year. We might have done like something like, a drop for like the rest, not necessarily drop off your roster, but take out of your lineup for the rest of the year, a guy that I'd be avoiding. And he was my guy at the receiver position. I know he had put up big numbers up until that point. There was actually a point this year where he was leading the league in receiving yards, but it's just, it's so boom or bust, man. And with a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, who plays quarterback the way that he does, I wouldn't bank on that being the case week in and week out. So I definitely get where you're coming from there. I said I was going to talk about one of Allen Robinson's teammates a little bit later. It's time to talk about one of Allen Robinson's teammates, and David Montgomery, the running back for the Chicago Bears, who has 3 20-plus point games this year. That's it. But 2 of those 3 are in the last 2 weeks. He's really finding his footing there. They're running the ball a lot better in Chicago. He's catching the ball to the backfield, finally involved there. Obviously, when Tariq Cohen went down with that season-ending injury, we knew this was going to be a 3-down guy when healthy. He obviously missed a little bit of time, but he's come back and played his best football since then. And down the stretch here, he's got Houston giving up the second most points to running backs. Minnesota, a little bit middle of the pack, but then he finishes up your fantasy championship, should you have David Montgomery on your roster, goes against Jacksonville, who's giving up the 5th most points to the position. So he's got 2 matchups in the last 3 against teams that are giving up top 5 to the position. Last week, going against Detroit, who gives up the most to the position, scored 25. The week before that, Green Bay giving up the 3rd most to the position. He scores 22. So this is a guy that's absolutely been feasting on these teams that give up a lot of points to the position. And again, 2 of his last 3 matchups come against teams that are in that bottom 5 as well. So unbelievable stretch of games here for David Montgomery to finish out the season, and he's not slowing down.
No, I don't think he's slowing down either. I think he's picking things up at the right time, especially for fantasy football owners who did take that chance on him and draft him, especially after a rookie year where it looked like Matt Nagy and the Chicago Bears were just, they weren't going to use him. You know, they drafted him super high for a reason, but Tariq Cohen was still there. Things just really didn't work out, but it really seems that he's finding his footing, you know, regardless of, teams really not being too petrified of either Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky and that quarterback. So I think a testament to him and Chicago's offensive line. Staying in the division, though, not only is this guy a perennial starter, I'm going to label this guy as a fantasy football championship winner for your league, Aaron Jones. Phenomenal talent, but whenever you look at his schedule this year, I think he has potential to put up 30-point games in each one of these matchups versus Detroit, versus Carolina, versus Tennessee. Lions allowing the most fantasy points to running backs right now. So, the first week of the playoffs for his matchup, I mean, you're already looking at a decent sized chance that he pops off and gets you to a championship game. And then following that, he has matchups with the bottom of the top 10 in Carolina and Tennessee, also in terms of allowing points per game to running backs. So I think far and away, he has the best schedule for running backs in terms of easiness of defenses, but irregardless, it's Aaron Jones. He's going to get the ball. Green Bay does a phenomenal job of getting him involved both in the rushing and passing game. But with the cakewalk schedule everybody thinks the Steelers has, you can apply that there to Jones and the Packers.
Yeah, I just mentioned what David Montgomery did to Detroit, and with Aaron Jones having that exact same matchup coming up, he's going to do the exact same thing, if not a little bit more, I would think, than David Montgomery. So absolutely, I'm on board with that as well. My running back to avoid here. It's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back for Kansas City. And this is going on weeks now. This is a guy that came into the year. I don't know if there was a bigger hype train coming into the fantasy football season than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But, a guy that people were like, yeah, he's got to go in the top 10. Then all of a sudden was like, should he go in the top 5? And I think that a lot of people ended up taking him like the 7 to 8 range, somewhere around there. But I didn't take him that early, but I wound up with him on one of my rosters. Thank God I also have Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs down the stretch here. But yeah, you look at his schedule coming up, and it's Miami, it's New Orleans, and it's Atlanta. And Atlanta, as bad as their defense is, they don't, they're still kind of middle of the pack against the run. And the other two, Miami and New Orleans, are very good against the run. So it's not a great schedule for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But let's be honest, regardless of who he's facing, the production just has not been there. And whether it be, the presence of Le'Veon Bell, who's not really doing much in his own right, the team just really not trying to even run the ball because they have Patrick Mahomes. So why would you be? But the running backs really aren't catching the ball in the backfield either. I mean, there's just no presence right now from that running back room. I don't want any part of it, trying to get some production out of it. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be a guy that I would, have on my bench right now, to be honest with you. And it's crazy to say that, but, just looking at one of my teams, the team that I have him on. So like I said, I have Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs. Hope Josh Jacobs is able to come back this week. My wide receiver room, I got Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, who we just mentioned, Devante Parker. I also have like Wayne Gallman and Melvin Gordon on my bench, who I would probably consider using even over a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now with what those two have done in the last couple of weeks. I don't know. Yeah, I've fallen completely off of the Clyde Edwards-Helaire bandwagon, at least for this season.
No, I'm right here with you because I also have Clyde Edwards-Helaire as my running back to have on your bench during the fantasy football playoffs.
Look at
Fun
this.
story. Fun story. There's one league where I had Clyde Edwards-Helaire that I also drafted Le'Veon Bell later on in the draft, and so yeah, not working out too great for me. But irregardless, you already mentioned the matchups versus the Dolphins, Saints, and Falcons. Saints and Falcons are in the top four, not top five, top four, both of them. And fantasy points, given to running backs, I think he's got very tough sledding ahead. And I mean, that's not even taking into consideration the lack of production he's had outside of those matchups. You already talked about the Kansas City Chiefs running backs not getting a whole lot of love in the passing game. And if Tyreek Hill's going to keep going off for 250 yards a game and keep doing backflips in the end zone, I mean, who can blame them? But just at the end of the day, CEH just is not living up to his first round moniker, his first round hype train, and matchups against the Saints and the Falcons here in the next 2 out of 3 weeks just doesn't do him any favors.
I honestly, I didn't realize Atlanta was that good. It was that good. Obviously, I put him on
think so.
So Miami's actually the best matchup he has left remaining, and they're still top or they're 11th. So
yeah, they're right outside the top 10.
Yeah. Man, and then New Orleans is the fewest.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta's 4th. Wow. Yeah, so it's not it's tough sledding ahead for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even if he were, putting up numbers in recent weeks, but that hasn't been the case. So it's trending the wrong direction in all areas for Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now. So going to the quarterback position, my guy to start, it's going to be Ryan Tannehill. He finishes up here with Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay. That championship matchup against Green Bay, not his best matchup by any means. Jacksonville and Detroit are very mouthwatering, though. And then when you get to Green Bay, I mean, I don't know. Depending on who the other quarterback on your roster is, maybe you use somebody else instead of Ryan Tannehill. I don't think it's, it's a not can't play this guy type of matchup, but they are, inside the top 12 in terms of giving up points to quarterbacks. So I don't love that by any means, but when you look at, hey, at that point, you're in the championship. So make that decision when you get there, but you got to get there. You got that Jacksonville and Detroit before that, and I love both of those matchups. So I would be using Ryan Tannehill for sure if he was on my roster, at least to start out these fantasy football playoffs.
Yeah, definitely, especially whenever it comes to, efficiency. And if Corey Davis is going to keep popping off like he is, and if A.J. Brown can find his health, then, maybe even Jonnu Smith, somewhat comes up and, starts playing healthy again. I mean, we're talking about a very, very solid Titans passing attack. And, it's very good at countering what Derrick Henry does on the ground. So just in terms of just being safe, I don't think you can go any wrong with a guy like Ryan Tannehill back there. My quarterback, we've already talked about him. He finally hit the dreaded rookie wall last week. We knew it was coming, and I think it's a good thing he got it out of the way prior to the playoffs. It's going to be Justin Herbert, with 3 matchups versus the Falcons, Raiders, and Broncos. Broncos, like I mentioned earlier, kind of a middle of the road defense, especially in terms of, line fantasy points to quarterbacks. But with a fresh matchup versus the Falcons this week, Atlanta is the worst pass defense in the league. And then Vegas is also a top 10 worst defense as well. I think Justin Herbert should get back on track. And I definitely think he has the weapons and the talent to do it. And the matchups definitely help.
Yeah, he was definitely a guy I considered too. I just wonder, if you have a guy, it's crazy that if you have a guy like that, a guy that wasn't even a starter on his own team coming into the season, it's pretty much like you're starting him regardless. I know that you had gotten burnt using him against New England. I don't remember. Did we say anything about that, his matchup with New England? Like, I don't remember if he was brought up as a topic at all.
I know we talked about how New England was a lot tougher matchup during like the end of the year than it was at the beginning. And I know we talked about him, somehow navigating around, that dreaded rookie wall that people always throw out. I don't remember any like solidified like hammering down, hey, like Herbert's not going to do anything versus Patriots defense.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. Atlanta, this upcoming week, who gives up, as good as they are against the run, they're that bad against the pass. They give up the most points to quarterbacks. Vegas, obviously, it's a top 10 matchup. Finishes up with Denver, who is a middle of the road matchup. But we didn't bring it up on here yet. But AJ Boye suspended now for the remainder of the season. So I mean, that's going to be a very much more attackable defense. I'm not sure. I know Bryce Callahan was hurt right now. I'm not sure if he'll be back for that matchup. We'll have to wait and see on that. But that's a very depleted secondary if they're missing both those guys. Even if they're just missing Boye, it's a lot different. So um, that could look a lot different just in a couple weeks in terms of where that matchup ranks from a fantasy perspective. So I absolutely love Justin Herbert's stretch of games here to finish off the season. Somebody who I don't love their stretch of games, and also just from what I've been seeing from him recently, it's Kyler Murray. And that just sounds crazy to say, but the thing with Kyler, what makes him so valuable, is his ability to run as well as pass and get outside the pocket and extend plays and make plays with his legs down the field. But if he's not doing that, and we haven't seen as much these last couple of weeks, and it goes back to that game against Seattle where he suffered a little bit of a shoulder injury, maybe he's a little bit more reluctant to run, and it'd be hard to blame him if he is dealing with some type of injury. Obviously, you don't want to, rush anything or re-aggravate something if it's there. But his stretch of games here to finish up the season, going against the Giants, who that is quietly a very bad matchup. They give up the fourth fewest points to quarterbacks. Goes against Philly as well, who, not a great team by any means, but they don't give up a ton of points to fantasy quarterbacks. And then against San Fran, who Kyler Murray has had success against in the past against. But that's not a great matchup. So these matchups down the stretch, none of them are very good. And if Kyler Murray's not 100%, and I don't think that he is based off what I've seen these last couple of weeks, he hasn't played well. The team hasn't played well. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They're kind of falling out of favor to try to get a playoff spot. They absolutely need a win. Kyler Murray needs to step up in this game. But the question is, can he? How damaged is that shoulder? Because there's definitely something going on.
Yeah, and ever since he's kind of damaged that shoulder, he's definitely been a completely different quarterback. Excuse me, sorry, I had to sneeze for a second. I hate that. But no, I think you hit the nail on the head, Kyler Murray. Part of what makes him a great quarterback is his ability to move around and escape out of the pocket and make plays on his feet. And whether that just be the shoulder or the lack of offensive line or, it's just a recent matchups, he just hasn't been doing it. I mean, we were talking about a dude who looked like he was going to run away with the MVP consideration at one point, especially after Russell Wilson followed off. And I think he's fallen off just the same. So, we'll definitely see. I did consider Kyler here for my quarterback, but I went elsewhere. I went Baker Mayfield. Next 3 weeks versus the Baltimore Ravens, New York Giants, and New York Jets. The Ravens and Giants are not terrific matchups by any stretch of the imagination. The Jets are kind of the saving face at the end of a very tough schedule for Mayfield. But, just the 2-week gauntlet that he's got to endure versus a pretty solid Baltimore Ravens defense. And then, like you talked about, a New York Giants defense, which not a lot of people talk about. But, they're very good statistically at limiting quarterbacks. And we know how prone Baker Mayfield is to making those, pivotal mistakes and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's just, I know Mayfield's been balling right now, and it's very, very hard, especially if you have him and nobody else, to leave him on the bench. But the next 2 weeks just don't look good for his forecast.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are probably going to be enticed to throw him into their lineup based off what he did to Tennessee. But going back, I mean, he absolutely torched Cincinnati in one other game this year. Actually, maybe in both their matchups, he had phenomenal games. But, I would be weary for the same reason that you are. I think that he absolutely lights up these bad defenses, but these next couple matchups aren't bad defenses. So we're going to see. We're going to see if, all of a sudden they're running a lot more play action. I think they've run the 5th most now play action plays on the season, but that's been a larger part of their offense these last couple weeks for sure. And when a team runs the ball so effectively, you absolutely have to be wary of that. That's become kind of their bread and butter. So we'll see. Getting back to Kyler Murray, I want to make one more point. He hasn't run for over 30 yards in 3 weeks. And I think that's a huge part of why we're talking about him not having that same fantasy impact, because these last couple weeks, he has just 8 points and 17 points. So, okay, but we're going to move along. We're going to go to our waiver wire now. I said there was a quarterback just now put in the lineup, a guy that we both saw in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl, taking over for Carson Wentz now. It's Jalen Hurts, who's owned at just 4% of league right now. Obviously, that's understandable. Guy that wasn't the starting quarterback there. That number is going to jump up. I am very intrigued by this situation. I don't think it's great by any means. I mean, as much blame as we want to put on Carson Wentz, and it's definitely deserved. He looked terrible. There was no pocket presence. There was no confidence to his game. that offensive line was terrible. And I think that really hindered Carson Wentz's pocket presence. Because if he wasn't getting sacked, he was assumed that he was taking a sack because of how bad the offensive line was. He thought that he couldn't get more than one read in. So I'm curious to see what Jalen Hurts is able to do there. I think what he has going in his favor is the plus mobility that he brings to the position. I don't want to say he's exactly, going to be like Kyler Murray. I think that would be ridiculous to say before this guy, really steps into the starting role. But I think in like most quarterbacks, I think that you're going to see come into the league now, you got to have that mobility. I don't know how many guys are going to come into the league from this point on that are statues back there that are just pocket passers.
Yeah,
I think pretty much every guy is. Sure. What's that?
Said no more Peyton Mannings, that's for sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like every guy that comes into the league now, just because that's the way the defenses are played, that's the way you have to play in this league, you're going to have the mobility aspect to your game. And Jalen Hurts absolutely does. I'm excited to see what he does there. Again, not a great offensive line, not great weapons around him, but I'm definitely intrigued by him. And I don't know where your thoughts are, but he's a guy that I would pick up, obviously take the waiver claim on. I don't know about just throwing him into my fantasy playoff lineup, but he's a guy, if I'm looking for somebody is just like a flyer, keep on my bench, stuff like that, see how he does. I'm intrigued by Jalen Hurts.
No, most definitely. And I think you forget who you're talking to. You're talking to the dude who suggested, had Jalen Hurts been there for the Steelers' second round pick last year in the 2020 NFL draft, that they should have taken him. I got a lot of flack for that. But I think that goes to show how much of a Jalen Hurts believer I am. And let's also throw another layer to your belief in Jalen Hurts. Not a lot of film on Hurts for teams to go off of. So it is that bit of a surprise element. There's not a whole lot of tape and tendencies defenses can study. So he could definitely catch a couple of defenses by surprise here in the next couple of weeks. So I really like that waiver wire pickup suggestion. Mine is going to be kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, just in terms of experience and years in the league. And I'm not sure how I feel about it now that I'm kind of saying it out loud. Philip Rivers owned 25% of ESPN leagues going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. Just once in the last 7 weeks where he scored under 17 points. The Raiders rank 23rd in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks in a good way, not in a bad way. It seems that he's turning it on. I'll talk about T.Y. Hilton a little bit later in the waiver wire pickup. Yeah. Big eyebrows to me, but no, Philip Rivers is I think a lot of people expected him to not be phenomenal this year, especially with his age and going to a new team, but lately he's just picked up a whole lot. So I think you do a whole lot worse than Philip Rivers on the waiver wire.
Yeah, it's funny because like as we're sitting here talking about it, it's like if you got to the point where you have to pick up a quarterback for the fantasy playoffs, like I just wonder what the rest of your roster looks like.
Yeah.
Because like who are
I would hope it's stacked at like receiver and like running back and tight end.
Yeah. But no, Philip Rivers was a guy I talked about a couple of weeks ago, who really seemed like he was coming together. He got his new toy going in Michael Pittman Jr. And now these last couple of weeks, to your point, and it's also a guy that I have on my list a little bit later in T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton started to pick it up the last couple of weeks. So if you have both those guys, if you have Michael Pittman Jr. going, T.Y. Hilton going, Trey Burton's been pretty solid for them at the tight end position. Zach Pascal has been a nice addition for them. Going back to last year, he kind of came on. So I don't dislike the pick of Philip Rivers for that reason. I think that he offers a pretty solid floor. I question what the ceiling is, but if you're looking for a solid, as you mentioned, like 17 points, which is what he's given you pretty consistently, I think that could be a solid play. My running back is going to be Ty Johnson.
Yep.
Of the New York Jets, owned also in just 4% of the leagues, goes against the top 10. And when I say top 10, I mean bottom 10 in terms of giving up points to the running back position. That's going to be the Seattle Seahawks. They give up points in bunches to running backs. They give up points in bunches in real life as well. That defense just straight up is not very good. Granted, they've been a little bit better these last few weeks. But Ty Johnson, every opportunity is going to be there for him now with Frank Gore suffering a concussion in their last game. So I absolutely love this matchup for Ty Johnson. And, we're going to see what Ty Johnson's got to offer. This is a great opportunity for him. It's just running backs have dropped like flies for the Jets. And here he is. He's the last guy standing.
Yeah, it feels like they've had 20 different starting running backs just through 13 weeks. Awesome. My waiver wire pickup of the week, owned in 1% of ESPN league. So you could probably order 104 yards and 22 carries with a touchdown on the ground last week. Had 2 receptions to go along with that as well. He was super productive in his first taste of action. And when going up against a not great Seahawks defense, you can only just hope that that'll continue.
This is wild. So we're gonna have the same guy at running back and receiver. I'm guessing based off the conversation that we've already had. T.Y. Hilton, who surprisingly is owning just 46% of Yahoo leagues. That means a lot of people have dropped this guy throughout the year, and understandably so. He was doing nothing for most of the season. But he started to pick it up these last couple of weeks. Now he's got Vegas and Houston, both middle of the pack matchups. But it's really about, again, what Phillip Rivers is starting to get out of these guys. The addition of Michael Pittman Jr. is going to help out T.Y. Hilton because, he's going to see less coverage. Zach Pascal, Trey Burton, obviously you have that run game with all those running backs in the backfield. I like what T.Y. Hilton's going to have the opportunity to do down the stretch here. Hopefully he can keep this train going of these last couple of weeks and just ride this out through the rest of the season and give people the fantasy value that we've seen this guy give people in most seasons. Just really completely fallen off a cliff going back to last year. Granted, the QB play hasn't been there going back to last year. It was, Jacoby Brissett. He gets hurt. You have Brian Hoyer there. They bring in Phillip Rivers this year. You think that's going to reignite this offense? To this point, it really hadn't for T.Y. Hilton. Last couple of weeks, we're starting to see it.
Yeah, I've been burned one too many times by T.Y. Hilton to ever draft him again. And I told myself I would never draft him again after very bad experiences with him in previous years. But, it's 2020. Wild things happen. That includes T.Y. Hilton being a waiver wire pickup. At the beginning of the year, a lot of people were picking him to be Phillip Rivers' guy in Indianapolis. Going from a guy like Jacoby Brissett to a guy like Phillip Rivers, who does nothing but throw the ball. But definitely fell off in the beginning part of the year. And yeah, I'll just echo everything he just said. 18 and 25 respective points in his last two outings. And I just think against the Raiders, that's another possibility.
Yeah, see, I was kind of weary of that. I know that was a big thing, was the connection that those two would have. I all along thought it was going to be the tight ends, that would be the most that would most benefit from the addition of Phillip Rivers there. And I think that just goes back to me looking at the relationship that Phillip had with a guy like Antonio Gates. And then, obviously Hunter Henry when he was healthy. He's always loved his tight ends. And not to say that it hasn't carried over, because Trey Burton has had plenty of weeks where he's put up huge numbers this year. Even Mo Alley Cox at the beginning of the season had some nice weeks. So his tight ends have definitely, benefited from the addition of Phillip Rivers. But yeah, these last few weeks, T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., they're starting to get going, and this Indy offense needs it. They're fighting for their playoff lives as well. So we'll see if they can keep it going. But yeah, and then my tight end, we'll see if we have the same guy here as well. I'm not sure, but it's going to be a guy that we just saw firsthand. Logan Thomas, owning just 41% of Yahoo leagues. The Steelers had only given up one touchdown to a tight end before this game against Washington. Logan Thomas gets in the end zone. I don't know if you heard, but this guy used to play quarterback.
No idea.
But he's really finding a home at this tight end position. I mean, it seems like he gets better every single week, and to do what he did against Pittsburgh, I mean, that just bodes well for his rest of the season, regardless of who the matchup is. I feel like this is a guy for such a thin position at tight end. I feel like we say it every single week, that you're going to have in your lineup if you have him on your roster, because how much better production can you get than what he's offering right now? Going back to the beginning of the season, he's been relatively consistent, and a lot of it was, start of the season, it was touchdown dependent, but he's kind of gotten away from that now to the point where he just seems like he's a target monster for them. When a guy like Terry McLaurin is getting shadowed by a top corner and not able to put up his huge numbers, like that just happened in that game against Pittsburgh, Terry McLaurin just 2 receptions on 6 targets. It's going to be a guy like Logan Thomas that is, that second option for Alex Smith.
Yeah, and it's really amazing to see, because I remember whenever he did play quarterback for the Cardinals, and then they kind of figured out that wasn't really his thing. Fun fact, he actually had to wear a special visor whenever he was throwing, because he had something weird with his eyes to where he couldn't see correctly. So he had to wear a special visor whenever he played quarterback for the very short time he did in the NFL. But yeah, I mean, I feel like if you can do that against the Steelers defense, you can almost do that against any other of the 31 defenses in the NFL. So big props to him. Jordan Reed 2.0, find out next on Undisputed. My tight end waiver wire pickup of the week is actually going to stay within the division. It's a name you've brought up multiple times throughout the year as well. It's going to be Dalton Schultz, on about 41% of ESPN leagues versus the Cincinnati Bengals. He hasn't scored at less than 7 points since week 7. He's going on a little nice 6 or 7 game streak of being somewhat consistent at the tight end position. And really, whenever it comes to a waiver wire, tight ends, kind of all you're looking for at that point. Going up against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, which just isn't really all there right now. So, with the consistency based on the matchup, that's going to be my top waiver wire pickup for the position.
Like, where did this guy come from? Like, Blake Jarwin goes down, and all of a sudden, Dalton Schultz is just, oh, yeah, here I am.
Yeah. What's
Just
up, guys?
making the most of his opportunity for sure. When you said staying in the division, I should have known that you meant with the guy that I picked, but I thought you meant the Steelers division for some reason. I was like, where's he going? Austin Hooper with this? Like, who could this possibly be? But no, I like that too. Dalton Schultz, again, a guy that I just said when Blake Jarwin went down, this guy was the next man up, and he's made the most of his opportunity, regardless of who the quarterback's been. So yeah, I understand. Who's he? Who does Dallas have coming up?
The Bengals.
Okay. Oh, Andy Dalton revenge game.
True. You heard it here first.
Absolutely. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Relatively.
Nobody loved us. Excuse me, enough to send questions throughout the week. So.
Yeah, I know. I think that the way to go with that is we provide the questions and put them in the form of a poll, because we saw crazy results in terms of numbers when we put those out. So maybe that's a direction that we'll go for at least a portion of next week's show. We'll see. Again, we try to switch it up every single week. I got to do a couple of ad reads here, and then we'll get going. But I do want to mention, as I will on the Steelers show coming up later tonight with me pulling double duty, rocking around the 412. There's literally 3 days left, and that includes today. So you have until the 12th to get involved in it. Crowworthy just recently, they're making their donation tonight, which we are super excited about. We finished shopping for 4 families already. We're going to be doing a 5th because of Crowworthy's donation, so we can't thank them enough for that. But it's absolutely insane going from 3 families last year to 5 this year, and also we're doing a lot more for the families this year than we did last year. It's insane that you guys getting involved with it. We can't thank you enough. And for your involvement, you donate at least $20, you're going to be eligible to win some great prizes. Jackham pylon, you can see that right over my shoulder. A James Conner jersey, a Minka Fitzpatrick autograph jersey, Juju Smith-Schuster signed football, a couple of Joe Musgrove signed baseballs, Brian Russ Pot, Chase Claypool signed photo, Benny Snell signed photo, Kevin Newman jersey. Is there anything I'm leaving out? Oh, Donnie's going to buy somebody something off our Crowworthy merch shop. So obviously we can't thank Donnie enough for that. But in total, there's going to be 13 prizes. I think we have close to 60 people that donated to this point. So, I mean, pretty solid odds there. I mean, better than you'll find off like one of our Twitter giveaways or something like that, where you're like 1 out of 1,000. So super excited, super encouraged by the results that we got for this thing. We can't wait to do it again next year. So for everybody that's already gotten involved, thank you. For anybody that's going to be involved in these next couple of days, thank you in advance. But anyway, you can find that GoFundMe link. Just search our Twitter handle in the word rock, and it will come right up. It will be a video of me talking about the mission, and it will give you a link right to the GoFundMe. Other than that, I'll tell you guys about one of our great sponsors, which is Manscaped. Football season is in full swing. That means it's time to throw on your team's colors. Make sure you don't fumble your grooming below the waist. Our partners at Manscaped are here to save your boys from a TJ Watt hit so you can stay clean and take care of yourself where it matters most. Manscaped is here with a surefire touchdown with the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months to perfect the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer. The Lawnmower 3.0 is simply the best hygiene tool for the modern man. Because of their ceramic blade and skin-safe technology, your snags will be reduced. Their Perfect Package 3.0 comes with the new and improved Lawnmower. It's waterproof, it's cordless, it comes with a box of briefs as well, and a travel bag for when you were done quarantining. The Perfect Package 3.0 also comes with a crop preserver and crop reviver, which we always talk about, but we refer to them as the ball toner and the ball deodorant. The deodorant is an anti-chafing ball deodorant, which ensures that your afternoon stroll doesn't end with your balls sticking to your leg. The crop reviver, which is the toner, is a spray-on toner for your balls. It's made with soothing aloe and witch hazel extracts that give your balls the boost that they need. You can get 20% off these products plus free shipping with code 412 at checkout at manscaped.com. Again, that's code 412 at checkout at manscaped.com. That would get you 20% off plus free shipping on all those products and more. They got something called a weed whacker that can be used for your nose hairs and ear hairs. They got body wash on there. They got cologne. They got foot spray, all that good stuff. Tyler talked about the foot spray all the time, so I'll let him talk about that later tonight.
Yeah, I think in terms of last minute Christmas presents, 20% off with free shipping with code around 412. What better can you get?
Stocking stuffers right there.
Right. Stocking stuffer for your stocking stuffer.
Oh, true. And then when you need to worry about your other hair, the hair on top of your head, you can head on over to Keith's Barbershop, which is located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. He's open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturday. And every Tuesday, he does $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. Again, that's Keith's Barbershop at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. PA is Pennsylvania for all you out there, by the way.
I hope so.
I think that's it. I think we can get out of here. We obviously wish everybody the best as the fantasy football playoffs either start, or maybe this is the last week of the regular season for ages, depending on how your league is structured, set up. But we wish you the best. We hope you get that W this week. Thanks for listening to Around the 412. This has been a presentation of Crowworthy, where winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, yes sir, and more. Don't forget to follow us at Around the 412. Follow them at Crowworthy. Visit the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts like this one, blogs, and much more. Until next time, we'll talk